My husband has told me multiple times, if you ever cheat on me, I'd unalive him, unalive you, then unalive myself. He seemed serious but calm at the time, just like he was stating a fact. When I brought it up later, he said it was a joke, but it wasn't said jokingly. I saw it more as a manipulation tactic than an actual threat. He's also mentioned things like how if he didn't have me, he'd have no reason to live, and that he wanted to unalive himself before we met, and then he didn't because he met me. My question is, for those of you who have experienced similar, did it escalate? To add, obviously I don't plan on cheating on him, but I'm wondering how concerning these sorts of comments are in a marriage. Almost forgot. I've put additional context in one of the comments, but I'm going to put it here too for new commenters, etc. Yes, his comment like this was concerning at the time he first made it, but I didn't really take it seriously. Since then, I've heard it so many times that it doesn't bother me anymore. Recently, there's been a bit of a development, and now I'm questioning everything, trying to work out if the man I thought I married was real. So buckle up. This one's going to be a long one. I've left some of the finer details out for the sake of trying to streamline this, but let me know if anything is unclear in the comments. When I first met my husband on Hinge at the end of April 2022, he was super insecure and controlling. About 4 weeks into the relationship, he discovered by going through my phone that I'd had a thing with someone like 2 weeks before I met him and accused me of cheating on him. I'd stopped seeing the other guy, let's call him K, as soon as I'd met my husband in person, because I knew it was something I wanted to pursue. But at the same time, I was telling husband I wasn't ready for a relationship, that we needed to take things slowly, that I wasn't his girlfriend. Apparently this didn't matter because when he found out I'd cheated, he flipped out, threatened to unalive himself, threatened me with violence. I should be kicking your teeth in, and overall made my life a misery. I was scared to go to sleep because I worried that he would hurt himself while I was asleep, or go through my phone and find things from before I met him to start worrying about. If he did, I'd get woken up asking who I'd sent this or that picture to. Like a month or two before he and I even started talking, I was told it was gross and that I needed to cut every guy in my life off. I did what he asked because I loved him, and because I was scared if I broke it off that he would do something really rash. 6 months later, I was tired of having my location tracked everywhere I went. I was tired of him leaning on me for emotional support, so I tried to break things off. He sat there and cried and told me he would change and he wouldn't be the same person again. I asked him to leave the house, and he said he would go sleep in his car. His brother lives a 5-minute drive from us. I said I wasn't going to let him sleep in his car, so I let him stay in the house on the couch on the understanding that he would not come into the bedroom. I woke up at 2 a.m. or so with him standing over me, telling me he was looking for something I'd already given him. I suspect he wanted to look through my phone again. I came home from work the next day to find a list of homeless shelters on a piece of paper beside his bed. I figured that I was supposed to see this and feel bad for him. The next day, he promised to change. So I gave him a chance to make things right. He promised me he would be the man I deserved, treat me like a princess, etc., etc. Everything's been mostly good since then. He seemed perfect. I thought I'd found my soulmate. Except for one night about a month ago when I was using his phone, and I needed to go back in his browser history to find something. I found a load of links to male escort listings on Locanto, and then a load of gay corn. He'd searched specifically for like young hot wiener and cute young guy jerking off. When I asked him about it, at first he pretended he had no idea what I was talking about. He then said, I don't even know what that was for. And then he told me that he was scared because his weenie was unresponsive, that he was trying to handle himself to Pix videos of me, us, and it wouldn't get hard. He then said he freaked out and that was his reaction, to see if it did anything. He said he started with the listings and then went to corn, had a flick through, and then closed it when it didn't do anything for him. I said I didn't understand because we had made love the day before, and it seemed to work fine then, and that he had a doctor's appointment the next day. So he could have asked about it then. I asked him if he had tried gay corn before, and he said yes when he was much younger, and that it didn't do anything for him. I said I was struggling to understand how he would turn to this suddenly if he's never been interested before. He ended up getting really defensive and screaming at me that he was freaking out. I can't believe you think I'm gay. I said it was no problem if he was bisexual or bisexual curious, I'm bisexual, but that the escort listings were a massive concern to me, and he knew how I would have felt about it. I ended up speaking to someone close to him about it, and then it came out of the bag that something he'd told me at the start of our relationship was a complete fabrication. He'd told me that the car accident he was in when he was 18-19s was an unalived attempt. Turns out this was a lie and that there was someone else in the car with him. I told him I didn't understand why he would lie about that, and he was super evasive and defensive. At the same time, I questioned him about a few other things that had been weird throughout our relationship, and it turned out that they were all lies too. Throughout our relationship, he's told me how much he values our openness and honesty, and how he could never lie to me, even if it was a white lie. I told him that all of these things being untrue was extra concerning, considering he was always so vocal about the importance of honesty and trust with your partner. I told him that I was struggling to trust him at this point, and asked him if there was anything else he had lied to me about or hidden from me throughout our relationship. Told him it was a lie amnesty, and that I just wanted everything else out on the table so we could go ahead with a clean slate and a bit of therapy. This whole time, he was being super evasive and was telling me that there was nothing else he'd ever hidden or lied to me about, that he was going to be completely honest from now on and that I knew everything now. I still didn't believe him, so he offered me his phone and Google account and told me to put my mind at rest. Turns out he didn't clean up as well as he had thought, because I discovered, no, it wasn't the only time he'd looked at escort listings since we've been together. A few months prior, he'd Google searched his ex, then searched for her name, and nudes, and then immediately watched porn and jerked off. The day after my birthday last year, he had been searching for booty call apps. Right before we met, when I was the gross one, for flirting with a guy, that he'd been signing up to no less than 15 hookup apps, with names like Sex Finder and Aussie MILFs and One Night Friend. He'd signed up to my transgender date the night before we met in person, after talking for a week and telling me he was smitten with me and couldn't wait to meet me. 4 weeks before we met, he was swapping pics with men on FetLife and talking about what he wanted to do to them, whilst telling them he likes trans femboy stuff. Also liking a lot of pre-op male to female pics on the same site. He'd had some sort of contact with an escort previously. Her email address was in his contacts, but couldn't tell me when or what for. That even though he told me repeatedly how he didn't see the appeal of OnlyFans sex workers, that he was still searching them more than he ever admitted to watching porn. He later admitted that he didn't realize that Google still saves your searches even if you clear your browser history. I tried to understand why he had done these things, whilst also feeling like the person he'd always portrayed himself as was a complete fabrication. When I asked him about searching for nudes of his ex, he immediately flew into a rage. No buildup, just straight to 10/10 fury. He screamed at me that he would never ever do that he would admit to anything else, but not that. He completely lost his mind. I've never seen anyone react in that way before. Everything else he said he just didn't remember. A few days later, I asked him to go stay with family for a bit so we could clear our heads. A few days later, I decided that I couldn't ever get over the betrayal that I'd felt. That I felt like I'd married a lie, and that more importantly, the trust was gone. About a week later, he told me he wanted to come home so he could return to work. His family lived 2 hours away. I told him he could stay in the house as long as he respected that we were still separated, and that I didn't want him coming home and pretending like everything was back on track. He said he totally understood. So far, it's not been like that, and he talks about when we do stuff and talking about how much he loves me, and it's kind of sent me back in time. 2 weeks. I don't know how I feel, and I don't know what to do. He's since admitted to everything, even though he said he would never do some of those things. And his excuses, reasons just don't gel. He's also admitted he's got a problem with lying, and that he doesn't know why he does it. I told him that I hate that I even felt like I needed to second guess him, and that I do not want to be the kind of wife who looks through her husband's phone. Part of me is hopeful that with enough counseling, we can make this work. But the rest of me fears that now the trust is gone. The relationship is done. Maybe I just don't love or respect myself enough to see how fricked this really is. Maybe I'm gaslighting myself. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Using my anonymous. My ex was this way. said those words to me over and over again, year after year, until they almost felt like they didn't mean anything. Then one day, he was having an episode and we were arguing, and he walked off and came back with a loaded gun. Thought I was going to die that day. Instead, he just stared at me, then took it and locked himself in the bathroom. Switched from me thinking I was going to die to trying to stop him from shooting himself. Long story short, it can absolutely escalate, and you'll never know when. Leave, and never stay around anyone who would say or even vaguely infer anything like that. Comment 2. This means he would unalive you if he thinks you cheated on him. He has violent fantasies specifically directed at you, and his mental health is hanging by a thread. You don't want to be there when it breaks. He may have no intention of letting you live a life without him. You must plan your exit very carefully. Move as far away as you can. Never meet him in person again. Edit. OMG the edits. You need to call a domestic abuse hotline yesterday. You are in imminent danger. Now for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for reading my last post. So, things have taken quite a turn since I last updated. After my husband came back home, it was clear that he was trying to act like everything was normal, despite our agreement that we were still separated. He kept making comments about our future together, which made me feel like he wasn't taking our separation seriously. I was already feeling overwhelmed, and his behavior just added to my stress. One night, about a week after he moved back in, I came home from work to find him sitting on the couch with a bottle of whiskey. He rarely drinks, so this was unusual. He looked up at me with tears in his eyes and said he needed to talk. He confessed that he had been lying about more things than he had initially admitted. He told me that he had been struggling with his sexuality for years, and that he had been using the escort listings and Corn as a way to explore his feelings without confronting them directly. He said he was terrified of losing me, and that he didn't know how to deal with his emotions. I was stunned. I didn't know what to say. On one hand, I felt a sense of relief that he was finally being honest with me. On the other hand, I was hurt and confused. I asked him why he hadn't told me this sooner, and he said he was afraid I would leave him. He said he loved me and didn't want to lose me, but he also didn't know how to reconcile his feelings. We talked for hours that night. He told me about his childhood and how he had always felt different, but never had the courage to explore his feelings. He said he had hoped that being with me would make those feelings go away, but they hadn't. He apologized for lying and for hurting me, and he said he wanted to work on himself and our relationship. I told him that I appreciated his honesty, but that I needed time to process everything. I suggested that we both see individual therapists and then consider couples counseling. He agreed, and we made appointments the next day. Over the next 2 weeks, we both started therapy. I found it helpful to talk to someone about my feelings and to get some perspective on the situation. My therapist helped me understand that my husband's behavior was not my fault and that I needed to take care of myself first. She also helped me see that it was okay to set boundaries and to take things one step at a time. My husband also found therapy helpful. He started to understand his feelings better and began to work on his issues with lying and trust. He told me that he was committed to making things right and that he wanted to be the best version of himself for both of us. During this time, I also started to reflect on my own feelings and our relationship. I realized that I had been ignoring red flags and making excuses for his behavior because I was afraid of being alone. I had been so focused on trying to make things work that I had lost sight of my own needs and happiness. One night, after a particularly emotional therapy session, I came home and found my husband sitting on the couch, waiting for me. He looked up at me and said he had something important to tell me. He said he had been doing a lot of thinking, and that he realized he needed to take some time to figure out who he was and what he wanted. He said he loved me and didn't want to lose me, but he also didn't want to keep hurting me. He suggested that we take a break from our relationship so that we could both focus on ourselves and our own healing. He said he wanted to move out and stay with his family for a while, and that he hoped we could stay in touch and support each other through this process. I was taken aback by his suggestion, but I also felt a sense of relief. I realized that this break could be an opportunity for both of us to grow and to figure out what we really wanted. I agreed, and we spent the next few days making arrangements for him to move out. Since then, we've been taking things one day at a time. We've been in touch regularly, and we've both been focusing on our own healing and growth. I've been spending more time with friends and family, and I've been rediscovering hobbies and interests that I had neglected. My husband has been working on his issues in therapy and has been exploring his feelings in a safe and supportive environment. While this has been one of the most challenging times in my life, I feel hopeful for the future. I don't know what will happen with our relationship, but I do know that we're both committed to becoming better versions of ourselves. And for now, that's enough. Thanks for reading. Am I the idiot for breaking up with my boyfriend after he humiliated me on our trip to Europe? I've been dating my boyfriend for the past year and a half. His brother, my brother, and he went on a Europe trip for a month. And I decided to tag along in one of the countries they were in for 5 days. Keep in mind, I have never been out of the country with him or on vacation with him. For some reason, I had a gut feeling this trip wasn't going to be the best. Some of the things he did, raising his voice, talking down on me and my brother, have been happening for quite a while now. I just decided to shrug it off in the past because when I did raise a concern about it, he would get mad. It's like when I was on this trip, I had a switch in my brain. I did not want to be near him, talk to him, or for him to touch me. I had the ick, so to speak. Here are a few of the things that happened. I fell down, bad. Possibly sprained my ankle, it still hurts. I got myself up, and he was laughing the entire time and said, "This is her when she's sober. Imagine when she's drunk." I didn't want to ruin my night out, so I didn't say anything. I wanted to take pictures. He yelled at me and said, "You want to freaking take pictures everywhere? Just walk." My best friend called me in tears. I was helping her out with something. Again, he starts going off on me because how am I going to help my best friend if I'm not in the country? I replied saying I'm just going to text her, and he throws a fit and puts his plate down loudly on the table and goes, "I'm tired of your freaking attitude." I started laughing because not once did I give attitude. I was out of it at this point. On the last day of the trip, we were all eating, and a topic came up. I was talking about it, and he goes like, "You can stop talking now." And I replied, "I was just saying XYZ. And again, he says, "I freaking hate your attitude you've had the past week." And I say, "Mine or yours?" And his brother replies saying, "Yours." I was in shock. I turned around and told him that he has no place to say anything. And his brother replied saying, "Well, I'm just saying what I've observed." I got up and called my dad in tears. My brother was shocked and couldn't get words out of his mouth. He too was incredibly annoyed by them. I don't know what to do. I'm back home and he's still in Europe for another 10 days. It's to the point where I feel so hurt. Everyone knows that he's a good person, and I know that too. I don't even think he knows when he hurts me. 2 months ago, I was ready to spend the rest of my life with him, but now I don't know anymore. I'm so freaking sad. I don't even want to talk to him about anything because I already know he's going to tell me, pull out the receipts, or he's going to be so dismissive about it. And if I do break up with him, his family and my family are going to go crazy. My mom loves him. His family wants us to be married ASAP. My dad told me, "You never truly know a person until you travel with them." To add, "Oh God, I did not think this would blow up." Hi everyone. I truly appreciate all of your comments and concerns. Now for some clarifications, I did not invite myself. I was invited, but not by my boyfriend, by my brother. He called me one day and told me, "You know, I think you deserve a vacation after your first year of law school, blah, 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 come for a couple days." I asked my boyfriend if that's okay with him and his brother, and he said yes. Now that I think about it, he gave a dry response, and I'm not sure if he wanted me to come. I also forgot one thing. He made a joke when we were there that his brother did not want me to come. My memory is so hazy from this trip. When I said in the original post that I know he's a good person, I have been sitting here in my bed, literally weighing the good and the bad. The good person comment comes from things he has done for my family and me in the past. He has done good things, not necessarily good to me mentally, though. I had done everything for this trip to be great for both me and my boyfriend. My mom sat me down before the trip and told me if something bothers me on the trip, I should swallow it and let it be until I come back. On everything that I love, I put on a smile the entire trip. Not once did I say anything bad towards him or acted like I did not want to be there. There were times I was tired, yeah, but what trip doesn't make you tired? I was grateful to be there. Now for an update. Hi again, everyone. I have been scrolling through all your comments the past 24 hours. It is so nice to have some people not think I'm crazy. It is day 3 of being back home, and no, I do not live with him. I talked to my dad today for a long time. I'm closer with my dad than my mom, if you guys haven't noticed that yet, lol. I told him I'm scared to talk to him, and his face completely dropped. And he told me his daughter cannot be scared of anyone. He said, I think we should talk to your mom about everything, so that's what we'll be doing tomorrow night, and he said he has my back no matter what. However, he said he does think that my boyfriend loves me, and that I love him. And this is just one of those moments where it's a bump in the road, and that he is way too comfortable because he thinks I'll never leave him. I told him it's for sure not just a bump in the road, and he suggested taking a break from him when he comes back to fully think about my life without him. As for my boyfriend, we have just been texting. Very coldly. He's posting stories and not texting me, so I think he's realized something's up. For context, his parents are something, and now I'm slowly tying everything together in my mind on how his dad treats his mom and how he treats me. One example that rings in my head is when we were at a wedding a couple of months ago at the same table. Both parents were visibly drunk, and I'd come up to the table to sit, but there was no room, so the mom had moved down so I can sit next to her. I will never forget the look on his dad's face. It looked like pure hatred when he angrily told her to sit back down. I was so visibly uncomfortable the entire time that a random stranger who was on the same table came up to me and hugged me and told me to hang in there. It's only going to get worse. There have been other moments too. I've walked on her crying in the kitchen clearly because of something her husband said, and her saying, "It's just allergies." No, it was not just allergies. I do not want to be in a marriage like that. God, how have I been so blind? Now for another update, I stopped sharing my location with him. He never once shared it with me because he told me I don't need it. Every time I brought it up, he dismissed it and said, "You already know where I am all the time." He asked my brother if he's talked to me because I stopped sharing my location with him, and I've never done that before. My brother said he seemed sad. I told him he's the one who messed up, and he's sad. The victimizing begins. I'm so mentally tired. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Break up with him while he is still overseas. Your family should understand that he is hurtful, and the situation is getting worse, even though you are not yet married. You need to leave. End the relationship and block him on all platforms. Never be alone with him again, and do not allow him into your house. He is not a good person. He is unhealthy and dangerous. Comment 2. I don't know what to do. I'm back home and he's still in Europe for another 10 days. Organize your life in a way that excludes him for these 10 days. Everyone knows that he's a good person. Literally no one knows that. Not a single person. My mom loves him. Then she can date him, despite his hurtful behavior. Now for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking with me through all this. So after talking to my dad, I decided to have that conversation with my mom. It was tough, but I laid everything out for her. She was shocked, to say the least. She kept saying how she never saw this side of him and how she thought he was perfect for me. I told her about the trip, the way he treated me, and how his behavior mirrored his dad's. She was quiet for a long time, and then she said something that really hit me. She said, "Sometimes we see what we want to see, not what's really there." That made me realize that maybe I had been ignoring a lot of red flags because I wanted the relationship to work so badly. The next day, I decided to take my dad's advice and think about my life without him. I went through old photos, messages, and memories. It was like, interesting of emotions. I remembered the good times, but the bad ones stood out more. I realized that I had been making excuses for his behavior for a long time. I kept telling myself that he was a good person, but his actions said otherwise. I also talked to my brother about everything. He was really supportive and told me that he had noticed the way my boyfriend treated me, but didn't want to interfere. He said he was sorry for not speaking up sooner. That meant a lot to me, because it showed that I wasn't imagining things. My brother also shared some of his own experiences with my boyfriend during the trip. and it was clear that he had been just as rude to him as he was to me. On the fourth day, my boyfriend finally called me. He sounded different, almost like he knew something was wrong. He asked me why I stopped sharing my location and why I was being so distant. I told him that I needed some space to think about our relationship. He got defensive and started blaming me for everything. He said I was overreacting and that I was making a big deal out of nothing. That was the last straw for me. I told him that I needed a break and hung up. After that call, I felt a strange sense of relief. It was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I spent the rest of the day with my family, trying to distract myself. My mom was more understanding after our talk, and she even suggested that I see a therapist to help sort through my feelings. I think I might take her up on that. The next day, I got a message from my boyfriend's brother. He apologized for his behavior during the trip and said that he didn't mean to hurt me. He also mentioned that he had talked to my boyfriend and that he was really upset about the whole situation. I appreciated the apology, but it didn't change how I felt. I realized that I needed to focus on myself and my own happiness. I also started to think about my future. I had always imagined it with my boyfriend, but now I wasn't so sure. I thought about my career, my friends, and my family. I realized that I had been putting my relationship above everything else, and that wasn't healthy. I needed to find a balance and make sure that I was happy on my own before I could be happy with someone else. On the sixth day, I decided to go out with some friends. It was the first time I had gone out since the trip, and it felt good to be around people who cared about me. We talked, laughed, and had a great time. It made me realize that I had a support system and that I wasn't alone in this. Throughout all of this, I kept thinking about my boyfriend's parents and their relationship. It was clear that his dad's behavior had influenced him, and I didn't want to end up in a similar situation. I remembered a conversation I had with his mom a few months ago. She had told me that marriage was about compromise, and that sometimes you had to put up with things you didn't like. At the time, I thought she was just giving me advice, but now I see that she was talking about her own experience. I don't want to live like that. By the end of the week, I had made up my mind. I needed to end things with my boyfriend. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the right one for me. I called him and told him how I felt. He tried to argue, but I stood my ground. I told him that I deserved to be treated with respect and that I couldn't be with someone who made me feel small. He didn't take it well, but I knew it was the right thing to do. After the call, I felt a mix of emotions. I was sad, but also relieved. I knew that I had made the right decision for myself. I spent the rest of the day with my family, and they were incredibly supportive. My dad told me that he was proud of me for standing up for myself, and that meant the world to me. Looking back, I realized that this trip was a turning point for me. It made me see things clearly and helped me understand what I truly want in a relationship. I want to be with someone who respects me, supports me, and makes me feel valued, and I know that I deserve that, and I'm not going to settle for anything less. Thank you all for reading and for your support. Am I the idiot for leaving my partner after they screamed at me? For suggesting a celebratory trip? We've been together for 3 years, living together for 2.5 years. We had gotten into a huge argument that blew up. He was stressing out about the housing crisis, telling me that we need to buy a house ASAP because he predicts interest rates will keep rising. I told him I agreed, however. I would like to be married before buying a house with someone. He said we can't afford a wedding plus a house right now and asked me to pick one or the other, a wedding or a house. It was pretty obvious which choice he wanted. I made a compromise with him that I at least wanted to be married on paper before we bought a house together, and he ended up agreeing with this. He also said that after the house, when we are more financially stable, we can have a wedding then, which I was fine with. The next day I had a change of heart and asked him if he would be willing to go on a celebratory trip together after signing our marriage papers, as a way to celebrate our marriage without a wedding. I don't know why, but this set him off and he started ranting about how weddings are a waste of money, that it's just pissing money away, and how stupid weddings are. I had to ask him multiple times to please stop ranting. That I got his point. The next day we got into it again, but this time it fully blew up. I asked him again if he was willing to go on a less expensive trip with me, again to celebrate our marriage after signing papers. Note that he would only be covering his portion. I would pay for myself. I suggested a short road trip to a small town near where we live. Again, this triggered him and he got very angry to the point where we started raising our voices at each other. Each time I felt like he didn't want to spend any money to celebrate our marriage with me, I tried to compromise with him and lowered the stakes. It ended with me saying something along the lines of, I just want to do something beyond just signing a few papers. We could go out for a nice dinner, or even if you bought me flowers, I'd be happy with that. Again, I don't know why, but this made him very angry, and he said things like, as if I never take you out for dinners and buy you flowers. At this point, I was so frustrated that I said, I'm asking you for crumbs and you can't give that to me. I just want the gesture that you care about celebrating our marriage. This blew up in my face because after I said that, we started yelling at each other and he said things like, I'm making the financially smart decision to buy a house and secure a decent future for our children one day, and you don't trust my decisions. To which I replied, what family? You don't have any kids yet. We should focus on making our relationship work right now. He ended it by saying, F/CK off, and then screaming, get out of my face 3 times because I was so stunned that I didn't move the first time he said it. I want to add that I try very hard to never yell insults, curse, or negatively label him when we argue. I believe the purpose of an argument is to try to understand each other's point of view. The worst thing I'll do is raise my voice. After he screamed in my face, I left the house and went to my girlfriend's. Then I saw a text from him telling me that I may as well pawn the engagement ring because he won't tolerate this level of disrespect of me leaving the house without a word of where I'm going. But he didn't ask. This is not the first time something like this has happened. A few months ago, I expressed to him that I was upset he had nothing planned for my birthday. And again, he blew up in my face and called me an effing psycho and said verbatim, I'm not going to change. If you don't like it, then frick off. I ended up leaving the house again that night and sleeping over at my friend's house. We ended up making up, and he apologized profusely and did end up planning something for my birthday. Now for an update. We just talked this morning, and he's extremely hurt that I moved my stuff out and slept at my parents' house last night. We're not officially broken up yet, but I have a feeling that's where this is headed because of me. And he said he's not willing to do therapy because he thinks it's a waste of time. Did I do the right thing? Was this relationship salvageable? I'd appreciate hearing any stories that are similar to mine. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. I have been married for 45 years, and the number of times my husband has screamed at me is 0. You deserve a man who respects you and is kind to you. It is difficult to think of leaving a relationship because you think to yourself, it's not that bad. But it really, really is. Once you are out of the relationship and over the initial emotions, you will realize that life is better without an emotionally hurtful jerk. I wish all the best for you. Comment 2. Nope, not salvageable. Be happy you dodged this particular heartbreaking bullet because being married to him would mean this type of conversation all the time. Now for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for reading. So, after our last big argument, things have only gotten worse. 2 weeks ago, I moved my stuff out and stayed at my parents' house. He was really hurt by that, and we had a tense conversation the next morning. He said he felt abandoned and accused me of giving up on our relationship too easily. I tried to explain that I needed space to think, but he wasn't having it. He kept saying that if I really loved him, I wouldn't have left. A few days later, we tried to talk things out again. I suggested we take a break to cool off and reassess our relationship. He got really defensive and said that taking a break was just a step towards breaking up. He accused me of already having one foot out the door. I told him that wasn't true, but he didn't believe me. He said he felt like I was always looking for an excuse to leave. During this time, I started to notice some changes in his behavior. He became more distant and started spending more time at work. He'd come home late and barely talk to me. When I asked him about it, he said he was just trying to stay busy and not think about our problems. But I couldn't shake the feeling that he was avoiding me. One night, I decided to confront him about it. I asked him if he was seeing someone else. He got really angry and accused me of being paranoid. He said he would never cheat on me and that I was just trying to find a reason to blame him for our problems. I felt terrible for doubting him, but I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something was off. A few days later, I found out that he had been talking to his ex-girlfriend. I saw a message pop up on his phone while he was in the shower. It was a casual conversation, but it still hurt. When I confronted him about it, he said they were just friends and that I was overreacting. He said he needed someone to talk to who wasn't involved in our relationship. I felt betrayed, but I didn't know what to do. We had another big fight that night. I told him that I couldn't trust him anymore and that I needed some time to think. He accused me of being controlling and said that I was the one who was pushing him away. He said he was tired of trying to make me happy and that he didn't know if he could do it anymore. The next day, I decided to move back to my parents' house for a while. I needed some space to clear my head and figure out what I wanted. He was furious when I told him. He said that if I left, I shouldn't bother coming back. I was devastated, but I knew I needed to do what was best for me. While I was at my parents' house, I started to think about our relationship and all the red flags I had ignored. I realized that he had always been controlling and that I had been making excuses for his behavior. I thought about the time he had called me an effing psycho on my birthday and how he had refused to go to therapy. I knew deep down that our relationship was toxic, but I didn't want to admit it. I also thought about my own behavior and how I had contributed to our problems. I realized that I had been too focused on trying to make him happy and had neglected my own needs. I had been afraid to stand up for myself and had let him walk all over me. I knew I needed to make some changes if I wanted to be happy. After a week at my parents' house, I decided to go back and talk to him one last time. I wanted to see if there was any chance we could work things out. When I got there, he was cold and distant. He said he had already made up his mind and that he didn't want to be with me anymore. He said he was tired of the constant fighting and that he didn't see a future for us. I was heartbroken, but I knew he was right. Our relationship had become toxic, and we were both miserable. I packed up the rest of my things and left. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but I knew it was the right decision. Looking back, I can see that our relationship was doomed from the start. We had different values and priorities, and we were constantly clashing. I was always trying to make him happy, but it was never enough. He was always trying to control me, and I was always trying to please him. It was a vicious cycle that we couldn't break. I learned a lot from this experience, and I'm determined to make better choices in the future. I know I need to focus on my own happiness and not rely on someone else to make me feel whole. I also know that I need to stand up for myself and not let anyone control me. Thanks for reading. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.